Mutant Chronicles, Fiction, The Apostle of Insanity Trilogy, Volume 3, Dementia, by Michael A. Stackpole. Chapter 32. We pushed on deep through the mining tunnel. Its surface bore the spiraled scars of the huge boring machine that had gnawed its way through the rocky surface. Dust rose with our footfalls, and because of the lighter gravity on Themis, hung in the air longer than it should have. While the dust cloud hanging at our rear could have led to our detection, I thought of it as an easy way for us to figure out which tunnel to take back to our skiffs and escape. Inside 10 minutes, we hit our first interior bulkhead. It was the first of two that made up a crude airlock. We could have fitted the whole squad inside, but Mitch had us come up in small groups to avoid us getting all bottled up. The Dark Legion had not set up a trap, so we passed through what we had seen as the first choke point without incident, and within half an hour of our landing, we approached the first of the habitat galleries. The galleries had been constructed as needed during the mining operations on the planetoid. The earliest ones, numbers 1, 2, and 3, formed a rough triangle toward the lower part of Themis, and all connected to one another. The second set, numbers 4, 5, and 6, formed an offset triangle higher up and all connected to one another. Habitat 2 linked up to 4, and 3 connected to 5. The last habitat, the one created for executives and their families, had been located at the top of the asteroid and connected to habitats 2 and 6, though it also possessed its own dock for the CEO's private starship. Because Bauhaus had abandoned Themis before the general paranoia about high technology had set in, when we hit our next objective, I went into action. Doffing my helmet, I used the computer jack in my tooth to link into the old Bauhaus 830 VRX system. Moving swiftly through the network, I hit the environmental control database and rated it for a current snapshot of conditions within the complex. I pulled out immediately, but in less time than it took me to replace my tooth, the computer in my brain finished the 3 rounds of comparisons I demanded of it. It matched the current conditions against Bauhaus's benchmarks for the base. First, it flagged any place where conditions met Bauhaus standards, and the only hit in that category came in the infirmary complex in the Habitat Gallery 2. We'd agreed that normal conditions probably marked where they were keeping Sandra and any other human captives, and both Pam and Wendy had suggested the infirmary as being a logical prison given Sandra's special medical needs. I flashed Mitch the hand signal for the infirmary, and we moved out. As I refastened my helmet, I studied the computer's second round results. The second set of search parameters looked for carbon dioxide and methane levels. We didn't know if the Necromutants being dead respired or not. If they did, we figured they'd give off carbon dioxide. Also, being corpses, we figured they were still decaying, even if only a little bit. So a search for methane concentrations could pinpoint them. The computer found suspiciously high levels of CO2 and methane in habitats 2, 3, and 5. This worked to our advantage because by blowing the connections between habitat 2 and 3, and 2 and 4, we could force the troops in 3 and 5 to take long detours before they could get to us. The only other connection out of 2 was the executive gallery, and since we could get out to the surface through it, we needed it as an alternative escape route in case Gallery 1 became nasty. The last operation results sent a shiver down my spine. I'd asked for atmospheric volumes, figuring I could use that information to determine the extent of alterations of the galleries or mines. All sectors reported back as normal, except the core sector in the executive gallery. It actually demanded less atmosphere, which meant it had been filled in with something. The only something that sprang immediately to mind was a statue to Muaji. If it had been constructed in the executive gallery, that meant Ragathal would be located closely to it. The idea of being forced to retreat through a Nephirite stronghold did not fill me with joy. but when I related the information to Hunter, he accepted it with a grim grunt and no further comment. We passed through Gallery 1 without opposition, which made me feel a bit better about the intelligence I'd gathered. Harris rigged the mouth of the tunnel leading to Gallery 3 with explosives, then similarly, booby-trapped the tunnel to 2 behind us. When all hell broke loose, he could detonate either tunnel with a radio command. Waiting in the dark for him to finish his work, the utter desperation and futility of our gesture slammed into me. Like the chill leaching heat from my body, it sucked my confidence away. While I had no doubt that what we were doing was right, I knew it was not expedient nor wise. At best, we could get one woman back, a broken woman, who might never even realize she had been rescued, and perhaps kill a number of Dark Legion troops. We were a defiant gesture, a curse shouted into the teeth of a storm. That many of us would die in making that gesture just rendered the whole operation ludicrous. Yet we were here, voluntarily, in defiance of our superiors and their desires. Each one of us, save perhaps Ash, knew our chances of survival were minimal, and our chances of success even more slim than that. Even so, we had chosen to accept the risks and jam our heads deep into the throat of the Dark Legion's lion. Why? As Carl had noted, philosophical questions have little to do with corporate policies. Likewise, philosophies are often cited as sufficient reasons for martyrdom. But it took more than a statement of principle to motivate us to put our lives on the line to save Sandra. As much as I could make a case for her captivity, lessening the freedom of all humanity, even I could not deceive myself into thinking that spilling my blood here would somehow liberate mankind. I could not answer why the others had come, but in response to my own internal inquiry, I felt a curious peace. I felt as if I were marching toward a point that would define my life and make me complete. I did not know if this was just the end of one chapter of my life or the end of the whole thing, but I just knew it was the thing I had to do. My life, my death, and rebirth had all, somehow, been shaped by chance or design to place me here on Themis at this point in time. What would happen in the future, I did not know. I only knew that whatever it was, it had been ordained since before my birth. I was but a piece in a puzzle that is reality, and I was about to be snapped into place. Hunter pointed down the tunnel, sending Ash, Jan, and me forward. Our enhanced vision allowed us to see more clearly than the other night vision devices carried by the other troops. We worked our way forward cautiously, with Jan advancing on one wing and me on the other. She'd get ahead of me by 12 yards, then stop, and I would go beyond her position by another 12. Ash lurked behind Jan and moved up when I did. We reached the opening into Gallery 2, and I gave myself a full minute to conduct a full survey of the area. The foyer was a right triangle with a convex hypotenuse. Our tunnel entered midway along the 100-meter wide base and tunneled to Gallery 3, headed off to our right by a third of the way up the longer arm. Bisecting the long arm just a bit beyond the tunnel to 3, I saw the dark opening of the tunnel that sloped to the executive gallery. The tunnel up to Gallery 4 joined a triangle near the nexus of the arc and long arm, roughly 200 meters from where I crouched. The infirmary complex lay at the middle of the arc, making it most convenient to the tunnel leading down from the executive gallery. The walkway along the front of Gallery 2's second level overhung the infirmary entrance. And somewhere in the back of that upper precinct, I knew we would find the barracks that housed the Necromutants and undead Legionnaires my survey had detected. Infrared and ultraviolet scans of the area revealed nothing out of order, though I did detect a faint heat source through the infirmary wall. I waved Hunter forward and set Harris to rigging our tunnel. Ash, Jan, and I sprinted across the open courtyard and reached the infirmary door unmolested. Ash pushed it open, Jan went in low, and I came in high. But no one shot at us. In fact, we found only 2 people in the ward, and neither of them was capable of doing anyone any harm. As the rest of the team, save the demolitions man Harris, filed into the infirmary, I crossed to where Sandra lay on a bed. She looked even more gaunt than when I had seen her on Mars. Her hair hung in greasy strings around her shoulders, and grime formed black lines beneath her fingernails. Her arms and legs had been strapped to the bed rails, while angry scratches near the site of the IV needle stuck in her arm suggested why she had been restrained. I smiled. That's the Sandra I knew, still fighting. Wendy Levine came up to the other side of the bed and pried Sandra's eyes open and flicked a light across each one, pupils equal and reactive, but slow. She's doped to the gills. Without comment, she eased the needle out of Sandra's arm and slapped a bandage over the bleeding hole. The Sacred Warriors had their own medic going over the ward's other occupant. Because they formed an armored phalanx around the bed, I could not see what was going on, but the machinery at the head of the bed was decidedly more complex and strangely warped than what the Dark Legion had been using on Sandra. Pam pointed at the bloated black instrument from which wires led to a skull cap. Looks like what they had Lorraine in the first time we found her on Luna. Do you think they were trying to do to him what they did to Lorraine? I reached out to caress her cheek, but held back because she needed human contact and my armored glove would deny it to her. Wendy shook her head. I don't know. Lorraine's hospital workup on Venus said she had abnormal brain chemistry. I don't know what that means to the Dark Legion, but in Lorraine's case, it means the total suppression or erasure of her life. Think of it as a stroke or amnesia. She doesn't know who she is. She might not even know what she is. I looked at Sandra, then back up at Wendy. Could the amnesia be a result of trauma instead of neurochemical changes? Are you talking hysterical amnesia? Wendy frowned for a moment. It's possible her mind shut down to cut itself off from what she saw. Catatonia, which she has exhibited, is possible in such cases. Hell, the trauma could have been sufficient that her personality fragmented. And what we have here is personality that remains catatonic when threatened. I shuddered as her remark hit close to home. If that were the case, she could be reintegrated. Levine eyed me closely. You a shrink, Dent? If so, you're more qualified to deal with her than I am. Informed amateur, Sergeant. I see. She nodded toward Sandra. Integration is possible, but it won't be easy, and it won't be here. Titus came over and stood at the foot of Sandra's bed. We have confirmed the identity of Brother Claudius Turba. His captors have not treated him kindly. Beyond him, Scythia removed her gloves and screwed a silencer onto her Punisher. What's she doing? Administering the sacrament of extreme termination. He is now a creature of darkness, so we will give him peace. I heard a muffled chuff. Then Scythia came walking over to Sandra's bed, smoke drifting up from the barrel of her gun, but she did not blink when wisps of it grazed her pale eyes. If you wish, I will take care of this poor unfortunate as well. She doesn't need a bullet, Inquisitor. I reached down and pulled my knife from the sheath inside my right greave. I presented the hilt to her. If you want to care for her, cut her loose so we can get her out of here. Scythia accepted the knife, but not before she could provide me with a bit of wisdom from the Book of Laws. The phone on the wall beside Sandra's bed rang. Without thinking, I started to reach for it, then stopped. I saw Mitch turn and look toward me, but his battle mask hid any reaction. I started to lower my hand, then every phone in the ward started to ring. Mitch nodded, and I pulled off my helmet. Then I answered the phone. Yes. I recognized Ragathal's voice and felt my stomach flutter. You are beyond succor. You were allowed to reach the infirmary because that is where you will spend the rest of your life. My nostrils flared. You don't expect us to throw down our arms and surrender, do you? No, you are expected to die screaming in agony. Then you will be resurrected to serve my master in the Dark Legion. Your master? Would that be Algaroth or Mawaji? What? Prostrate yourself to his idol again, Ragathal, and pray hard. I smiled at my companions. We're beyond succor, because we didn't want anyone else to have the pleasure of your dying moments. You are but 24. I heard a burst of gunfire and a scream from outside. You cannot prevail. Though it was rude, I slammed the phone down on the receiver. Ragathol, I shouted to Hunter. He wanted to know if we deliver. Mitch slapped his assault rifle affectionately. Piping hot, hits the spot. Come on, campers, service with a smile. Mutant Chronicles, Fiction, The Apostle of Insanity Trilogy, Volume 3, Dementia, by Michael A. Stackpole. Chapter 32, End.